Millionaire believed he was trapped in an arranged marriage until the bride lifted her veil and stole his breath. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain poured over Manhattan that night, tracing silver lines down the glass walls of Voss Tower. Inside the top-floor office, Ethan Voss, 32, heir and CEO of the Voss Holdings empire, stood alone under the glow of the city. His reflection stared back at him through the window's sharp suit, cold eyes, and a heart running out of choices. On his desk lay a thick envelope embossed with gold. Across the front, in perfect cursive, read, "Marriage contract, Voss and Leighton alliance." He picked it up slowly, his thumb brushing the wax seal. The rain outside seemed to echo the weight in his chest. "An arranged marriage," he murmured, his voice low, almost bitter. "In the 21st century, what a joke." But the joke was on him. His company's board had voted. His father's health was failing, and the Leighton family, their fiercest competitors, had agreed to merge only if the deal was sealed by a marriage. His marriage. Ethan ran a hand through his hair and poured himself a glass of bourbon. The amber liquid caught the light like molten fire. "A merger disguised as matrimony," he said under his breath. "At least the press will love it." A soft chime broke the silence, an incoming message on his phone. "Father, son, this is not a request. Sign the contract tonight. The ceremony is Saturday. The future of Voss Holdings depends on you." Ethan stared at the text until the words blurred. His jaw tightened. He wanted to throw the phone, to walk away from the empire, the expectations, the suffocating duty. But then he saw the framed photo beside the contract, his father in a hospital gown, smiling weakly. He exhaled slowly. "You built this company from nothing," he whispered. "I will not be the one to let it burn." Sliding the contract closer, he uncapped his pen. His signature flowed across the page like surrender. At that exact moment, thunder cracked over the city. For a brief second, he glanced at the small photograph attached to the final page, a blurry image of his soon-to-be bride. She was veiled in white, face hidden, head slightly bowed. No expression, no identity, just a pawn in another family's empire. Ethan shut the folder and downed the bourbon. "I guess this is how freedom ends," he said quietly. Outside, lightning illuminated the skyline. Inside, a man who had everything: money, power, control, just agreed to give up the only thing he could never buy: his choice. And in less than 48 hours, he would discover that the woman behind the veil was not who he thought she was, and nothing about this marriage was fake anymore. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself shared Ethan Voss's mood. The city buzzed with luxury cars and reporters, but inside his penthouse, everything felt silent. The tuxedo lay perfectly pressed across the bed, the silver cufflinks engraved with the Voss crest. Ethan adjusted his tie before the mirror, expression unreadable. His assistant, Daniel, lingered in the doorway holding a small box. "Sir, the Leighton family has arrived at St. Augustine Cathedral. The ceremony begins in 1 hour." Ethan nodded, his tone dry. "Perfect. Nothing like a little corporate merger disguised as love to start the weekend." Daniel hesitated. "Do you want to see the bride before the ceremony?" Ethan gave a short laugh. "What would be the point? I already signed my life away." He picked up the box and opened it. Inside lay the wedding ring, platinum, flawless, heartless. "Let us just get through today." The cathedral stood like a marble fortress on Fifth Avenue, its doors flanked by photographers shouting questions. "Mr. Voss, how does it feel to marry your rival's daughter? Is this a love story or a business deal?" Ethan ignored them all, his jaw set as he walked up the steps. The echo of the church organ filled the air, solemn and grand. Inside, the pews were lined with New York's elite. The Leightons sat on one side, proud and polished. On the other, the board of Voss Holdings whispered behind their programs. The priest's voice carried through the hall. "Please stand for the bride." Razat. Every head turned. From the far end of the aisle, she appeared, a slender figure in a white gown, veil cascading like mist, bouquet trembling in her hands. Ethan could not see her face, but something in her posture caught his attention. She was not gliding with practiced grace like a socialite. She walked slowly, deliberately, as if weighing every step. When she reached him, Ethan extended his hand. Her fingers brushed his palm, warm, steady, real. He looked down, but the veil hid everything except the faint outline of lips pressed tight. "You may begin the vows," the priest said. Ethan's voice sounded foreign to his own ears. "I, Ethan Voss, take you to be my lawfully wedded wife." The words felt like sandpaper in his throat. When it was her turn, her voice was soft but clear. "I, Ava Leighton, take you to be my husband." The name hit him like a quiet jolt. Ava. He had heard that name before in charity circles, on the cover of a foundation brochure. He remembered a woman who had once stood up to a senator during a fundraiser, speaking about women's education. He remembered thinking her courage was rare. But that had been months ago, and he never saw her again. Surely it could not be the same woman. The priest smiled. "You may seal your vows with the rings." Ethan slipped the band onto her finger. It fit perfectly, too perfectly. She hesitated before doing the same for him, her hand trembling just once before steadying. When the priest declared them husband and wife, the applause sounded polite but hollow. Cameras flashed, and Ethan forced a smile for the crowd. Only when they turned toward the exit did he feel her whisper near his ear, low enough for only him to hear. "I know this is not what you wanted, Mr. Voss, but not everything signed on paper is what it seems." He turned slightly, startled, but she was already walking ahead, veil still covering her face. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting off the limousine waiting at the curb. Ethan followed, unsettled. He had expected obedience, silence, a stranger who would play her role. Instead, his new wife's words lingered in his mind like an unanswered question. For the first time, Ethan Voss began to wonder if the real contract he had just entered was not written in ink, but in mystery. The reception was held that evening at the Leighton family estate, a mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. Crystal chandeliers glowed above walls lined with oil paintings, and the air smelled faintly of roses and old money. Guests moved through the grand hall, smiling for the cameras, champagne glasses glittering in their hands. Ethan Voss stood near the edge of the ballroom, collar loosened, watching the crowd with quiet detachment. Every handshake, every toast, every compliment felt rehearsed. To them, tonight was not a wedding. It was a transaction. Across the room, his new wife, Ava Leighton, stood beside her father, greeting senators and business tycoons with perfect composure. The veil was gone now, replaced by a simple diamond hairpiece that caught the light each time she turned her head. Ethan found himself studying her face longer than he meant to. She was not the cold heiress he expected. There was warmth in her eyes, and a steadiness that unsettled him more than indifference ever could. When their gazes met, she smiled politely and made her way toward him. "You have been standing in that corner for 20 minutes, she said quietly, voice low enough not to draw attention. "If you want to escape, at least pretend to enjoy yourself first." He lifted an eyebrow. "I did not realize my enjoyment was part of the contract." Ava's lips curved faintly. "It was in the fine print. You really should have read all the clauses." Her tone was light, teasing, but there was something beneath it, something calm, intelligent, and controlled. Ethan almost smiled. "Almost. I read enough to know we are partners for 1 year. After that, we are free." She held his gaze. "Free from each other, maybe, but not from the consequences of what we choose to be in that year." Before he could reply, her father approached, hand extended toward Ethan. "Son, allow me to introduce you to our European investors." His tone was rich with approval and calculation. "They are thrilled to see this alliance." Ethan plastered on the polite smile he had perfected over the years. "Of course, Mr. Leighton." The investors began their questions, stock projections, merger strategies, expansion plans, and for a moment, Ethan's professional instincts took over. But when one of them made a condescending remark about Ava's role being merely decorative, Ethan felt her stiffen beside him. Without missing a beat, she replied, "Decorative roles are often the most dangerous. They make men forget who is really holding the strings." The table fell silent. Ethan glanced at her, surprised, then caught the flicker of admiration he tried to suppress. Later that night, after the final toast, they escaped to the garden. The city lights shimmered beyond the iron gates, and the faint hum of jazz drifted from inside. Ava removed her heels and sighed softly. "I hate rooms full of people pretending to care," she said. Ethan looked at her, the sarcasm gone from his voice. You handled them well. Your father must be proud. She hesitated, her expression softening. My father sees power, not people. Tonight I was just another piece on his board. But maybe that makes two of us. The air between them grew quiet. For the first time, Ethan saw her not as leverage, not as the daughter of his rival, but as someone trapped in the same gilded cage. He broke the silence. Tomorrow morning, our lawyers will send the official contract. It lists everything expected of you, events, appearances, schedules. I will make sure you have a copy. Ava turned to him. And what does the contract expect from you, Ethan? He hesitated. To keep up the illusion. She nodded slowly, a trace of sadness in her eyes. Then I suppose we both have roles to play. To the Los Shans, to one of her self-you ones who eps. As she walked back toward the mansion, the wind lifted the edge of her gown, brushing against his hand. Ethan watched her go, realizing with a quiet unease that for the first time since signing that contract, he was no longer sure which part of the illusion was supposed to be fake. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of the Voss penthouse. Ethan sat at the dining table, a silver tray untouched before him, coffee cooling beside a folded newspaper. The headline blared across the front page, Voss-Leighton merger, sealed with a kiss. He turned the paper over without reading further. Daniel entered, holding a stack of documents. The lawyers finalized the terms, sir. Mrs. Voss will receive her copy later today. Ethan looked up sharply. Do not call her that. Daniel hesitated. It is her legal name now. Ethan rubbed his temples. Right. Legal. Like everything else in my life. He signed, where Daniel pointed, then waved him off. Have the driver ready. I will deliver the documents myself. The Leighton estate was quieter than it had been during the wedding. The staff moved discreetly, their footsteps echoing against marble floors. Ava was in the study when Ethan found her, surrounded by open books and architectural sketches spread across the desk. You design? He asked, surprised. She looked up, startled but calm. When I can. My mother was an architect before she married into all this. She gestured at the blueprints. I design community centers for our foundation. Not every legacy has to be built on money. Ethan set the envelope down on the table between them. These are the final conditions of our arrangement. Public appearances, joint events, and media obligations. The usual expectations for a business marriage. Ava opened the envelope and scanned the first page. Clause 3, she murmured. No emotional involvement, no interference in each other's personal affairs. She smiled faintly. Practical. Ethan crossed his arms. It keeps things clean. Or cold, she replied, signing anyway. But perhaps that is what you prefer. Their eyes met across the table. Something unspoken passing between them, something neither dared name. That afternoon, they attended their first official appearance as husband and wife, a charity luncheon hosted by the Voss Foundation. The ballroom was filled with reporters and donors eager to see the newlyweds. Ethan stood poised, answering questions about business strategy and the symbol of unity their marriage represented. Ava, meanwhile, drifted among the guests with quiet grace. Halfway through the event, Ethan noticed her speaking with a group of young interns near the buffet table. She knelt beside one girl in a worn dress, listening intently to her story. When the girl hesitated to reach for food, Ava gently placed a plate in her hands and whispered something that made her smile. Later, Ethan approached her. You do not have to play the saint, they already adore you. She turned toward him, calm but firm. Maybe I am not playing. Her sincerity caught him off guard. For a man used to deals and deception, Ava's kindness was disarming. When the luncheon ended, they rode home in silence. The city lights flickered through the car window, scattering reflections across Ava's face. Ethan watched her without meaning to. You handled them well, he said finally. She looked out the window. I was not handling anyone. I was listening. There is a difference. He had no reply. As the car pulled up to the penthouse, Ava turned to him. You know, Ethan, not everything has to be written in a contract. Some things are meant to be felt. She stepped out before he could respond, leaving him staring after her as the city wind rushed in through the open door. That night, alone in his study, Ethan poured himself another glass of bourbon. The reflection in the window stared back at him again. Sharp suit, tired eyes. The man who had agreed to a loveless marriage. But now, for the first time, he wondered if it was still loveless or if the terms of the deal had already begun to change. A week later, the Voss-Leighton alliance was the headline of every business magazine in New York. Investors celebrated, stock values climbed, and the board of directors treated Ethan like a savior. But behind the closed doors of Voss Holdings, tension brewed quietly. The first public test of their perfect marriage came sooner than expected. The couple had been invited to attend the Empire Business Gala, an event filled with billionaires, politicians, and relentless reporters. Ethan knew the entire board would be watching for even the smallest crack in the illusion. That evening, he waited in the penthouse foyer, straightening his tie for the third time. Ava descended the staircase in a dark emerald gown that shimmered beneath the chandelier. She was stunning, yes, but not in the artificial way of high society. There was dignity in her stillness, confidence in the way she carried herself. "You clean up well," she said with a soft smile, adjusting his tie. Ethan chuckled. "I am surprised you showed up at all." "I signed a contract, remember?" she replied. "Clause number 1, attend all required events." He smiled faintly. "You actually read the fine print." "I always do," she said, eyes glinting. At the gala, cameras flashed the moment they entered. They posed for photos, hands linked, the image of elegance and power. Reporters shouted questions about love, legacy, and business expansion. Ethan responded smoothly, the practiced smile never leaving his face. But Ava noticed the slight tightening of his jaw each time someone mentioned his late mother or the company's debt. When the formal interviews ended, they joined the other guests in the grand ballroom. Waiters weaved between tables, violins hummed in the background, and the air smelled faintly of expensive perfume. During dinner, one of the senior investors raised a toast. "To Ethan and Ava, the merger that saved an empire. May this marriage bring as much profit as love. It is not be what is one of them met a round of great men, and that may gate it." Laughter rippled through the hall. Ava lifted her glass but did not drink. Her gaze drifted to Ethan, who kept his composure but said nothing. The remark stung, even if he would never admit it. Later that night, while the orchestra played, Ava slipped away to the balcony overlooking the Hudson River. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the distant sounds of the city. Moments later, Ethan joined her, jacket draped over one shoulder. "You disappeared," he said quietly. "I needed air," she replied. "Inside, everything feels staged, even the smiles." He looked out at the skyline. "That is the price of power. Everyone pretends." She turned to him. "Do you?" He hesitated. Pretending is easier than feeling. For a moment, neither spoke. The city glowed below them, endless and indifferent. Then Ava said softly, "You know, there was a time when I believed marriage was about partnership, two people building something real. But tonight I realize we are just performing for a crowd." Ethan met her gaze, something flickering behind his eyes. "Maybe we do not have to perform when the doors close." Ava studied him for a long moment, then shook her head gently. "That was not in the contract, Ethan." Before he could respond, a commotion erupted inside the ballroom. A group of journalists had cornered a board member who let slip that the marriage might have been arranged to protect Voss Holdings. Cameras were already turning toward the balcony. Ethan cursed under his breath. "They are going to spin this into a scandal." Ava's expression hardened. "Then let us give them something else to talk about." Without hesitation, she took his hand and stepped closer, their bodies inches apart. "Smile for the cameras, Mr. Voss," she whispered. And when the flashbulbs went off, she leaned in and kissed him, not as part of an arrangement, not for the contract, but as a quiet act of defiance. The crowd inside erupted in applause, mistaking rebellion for romance. But for Ethan, that single kiss burned through every wall he had built, and for the first time, he was not sure what was real anymore. The photographs from the gala flooded every news outlet by morning. "The kiss that saved Voss Holdings," the headlines screamed. Every magazine called it a moment of passion between a power couple. But for Ethan, it was something far more complicated. He sat in his office, scrolling through the photos on his tablet. Each image showed him and Ava on the balcony, framed by city lights, her hand resting gently on his chest. He could almost feel the warmth of that moment again, the way time had stopped. He was supposed to hate the charade, but the truth was, that kiss had felt terrifyingly real. When Ava entered his office that afternoon, he looked up sharply. She was composed as always, dressed in a pale cream suit that made her look every bit the executive she was raised to be. I assume you have seen the coverage, she said calmly. I have, he replied. Congratulations, Mrs. Voss. You managed to turn a disaster into free publicity. She tilted her head slightly. You say that as if you did not enjoy it. He met her gaze, unblinking. Enjoyment was not in the contract. A faint smile crossed her lips. Neither was damage control. Yet here we are saving your company again. This sick, Ethan set the tablet down. Our company. The correction slipped out before he could stop it. Ava seemed caught off guard. Her voice softened. That is the first time you have said that. Silence settled between them, heavier than before. Over the next few weeks, they appeared together at multiple events, charity dinners, press conferences, foundation meetings. To the public, they looked inseparable, but behind closed doors, something unspoken was shifting. Ethan found himself noticing the smallest things. The way Ava tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, how she stayed up late sketching designs for community projects, how she always thanked the staff by name. These were not gestures of a woman playing a part. They were signs of someone genuine. One night, after a long meeting, Ethan found her in the penthouse kitchen, barefoot, making tea. He stopped at the doorway. You are working late again, Ava smiled without turning. I could say the same about you. He leaned against the counter. You never stop. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Neither do you. For a moment, the room felt smaller. The air charged. Then she said softly, You should know something. The foundation event next week is not just another charity gala. It is the anniversary of my mother's death. She started the foundation before she passed. I continue it because she believed compassion should never depend on status. Ethan's expression softened. I am sorry, Ava. I did not know. She was the only person who saw me as more than a last name, Ava whispered. That is why I cannot let her legacy turn into a marketing strategy. He hesitated, then said quietly, I will make sure the event stays about her, not the company. She looked at him then, and something in her eyes flickered gratitude, maybe even trust. The next day, Ethan canceled a major shareholder dinner to attend the foundation planning session. The board protested, but he stood firm. For once, business could wait. That night, as he left the meeting, he saw Ava outside the building, standing under the soft glow of the street lamp. She was waiting for her car, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Without thinking, he shrugged off his coat and placed it over her shoulders. She turned in surprise. You will freeze. He smiled faintly. I will survive. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other. The city noise faded, leaving only the sound of rain beginning to fall. Ethan did not know when their arrangement had stopped feeling like an obligation. All he knew was that when he saw Ava smile beneath his coat, he felt something he had not felt in years, peace. And somewhere deep down, he realized the impossible had already begun. The marriage built on paper was slowly becoming real. The night of the foundation gala arrived, a night meant to honor Ava's late mother, but one that would test everything Ethan and Ava had built together. The ballroom of the Grand Regency Hotel glowed with gold and white. Photographers crowded near the entrance, their flashes reflecting off chandeliers and crystal glass. Ava stood at the center of it all, poised and radiant. Her gown was simple yet elegant, her mother's pearl bracelet glinting softly on her wrist. Ethan could see that she was nervous, even if her face betrayed no sign of it. He moved to stand beside her, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. You look like her, you know? Ava turned to him, surprised. You met my mother? No, Ethan admitted. But if she created this night, I imagine she carried the same quiet strength you do. Her eyes softened. Thank you, Ethan. Before they could say more, a voice echoed from the stage, one of the Leighton board members, Richard Hall, Ava's father's longtime associate. He had been circling the couple for weeks, suspicious of the sudden warmth between them. As the applause faded, he stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard began, smiling too widely. Before we continue tonight's program, I believe the public deserves a bit of transparency about our hosts. Ava's hand tightened around her glass. Ethan's instincts went cold. Richard gestured to a large screen behind him. While the world celebrates this so-called love story, the truth is far less romantic. The lights dimmed. A slideshow appeared, scanned pages of the marriage contract, each clause visible in bold print. Gasps rippled through the crowd as words like business arrangement, public appearances, and termination clause flashed before them. Ava's heart sank. She could hear the whispers already starting. Ethan's expression hardened as Richard continued, pretending concern. This union was never about love. It was about saving a company, a performance, nothing more. He turned to Ava with mock pity. Your mother believed in authenticity. What would she say about this lie? Ava's face went pale, but before she could speak, Ethan stepped forward. His voice cut through the murmurs like thunder. Enough! The room fell silent. He took the microphone from Richard, his tone steady but sharp. You are right about one thing, Mr. Hall. This marriage began as a deal. I agreed to it because I thought loyalty could be bought and love could be faked. I was wrong. Their place, everything's all the ain't not God. He turned toward the audience, every camera pointed at him now. The contract was mine. I wrote it, and I am the one who broke it, because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with my wife. A hush swept through the ballroom. Ava stared at him, eyes wide, tears threatening to fall. Ethan continued, voice softening. If anyone here wants to talk about truth, here it is. I married a woman who reminded me what integrity looks like. She turned my company's survival into something human. She made me remember what it means to care. He looked directly at Ava. If that is a scandal, then I will gladly face it. Richard tried to protest, but the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed again, this time not for gossip, but for something genuine. Ava's eyes shimmered as she stepped closer to Ethan. You just broke every clause in that contract, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Then let us call it a rewrite. The orchestra began to play softly, filling the air with strings and light. Ava placed her hand in his, the noise of the room fading away. For months, they had played the roles written for them, CEO and heiress, partners in name only. But in that moment, as applause filled the ballroom, they both knew that the script no longer mattered. What began as a contract had turned into something far more powerful, something neither of them could control anymore. And the world, for the first time, saw the truth. Ethan Voss was no longer pretending. After the gala scandal, the story of Ethan and Ava spread faster than wildfire. Every television network replayed his confession speech, calling it the most unexpected declaration in corporate history. Some praised his honesty, others called it a publicity stunt. But to Ethan, none of that mattered. What mattered was the look in Ava's eyes when he told the truth. For the first time in his life, he felt free. Yet freedom came at a price. By the following week, the board of Voss Holdings held an emergency meeting. Several investors demanded Ethan's resignation, claiming he had jeopardized the company's reputation. Ethan attended the meeting without hesitation, standing at the head of the long mahogany table. You want me gone? He said evenly. Fine. But before you vote, remember one thing. This company was built on my father's belief that integrity keeps us alive longer than profit ever will. I will not apologize for honoring that. The room fell silent. The vote never happened. That evening, Ethan returned to the penthouse, exhausted but strangely calm. The city skyline glowed outside the window, and the lights of passing cars danced across the marble floor. Ava was there, sitting by the fireplace, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. I heard about the meeting, she said softly. They did not force you out. He shook his head. They tried. But I reminded them who signed their paychecks. Ava smiled faintly. You are reckless. Maybe, he said, walking closer. But you are the reason I took the risk. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Ethan, you did not have to do what you did last night. You could have kept pretending. I have been pretending my entire life, he replied. Pretending to be the man my father wanted, the leader the world expected. You were the first person who ever looked at me and saw something human. One in there and decides, with fallible calf. It is Lastions. Her breath caught, her voice barely above a whisper. And what do you see when you look at me? He stepped closer. Everything I was too afraid to want. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the silence between them charged with something that felt both fragile and inevitable. Then Ava set her cup down and spoke quietly. You realize what this means, right? There is no going back. The contract is broken, the deal is gone. Ethan smiled, his voice low. Then let us build something real instead. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Ava froze as he opened it. Inside was not the glittering diamond of their first wedding, but a simple gold band engraved with one word, choice. Her eyes filled with tears. Ethan, what are you doing? He took her hand, making the only proposal that ever mattered. No contracts, no obligations, just us. If you still want that. Ava stood speechless for a moment, then laughed softly through her tears. You are asking me to marry you again? He nodded. For the right reasons this time. The fire crackled beside them, throwing soft light across their faces. Ava reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed his. Then yes, she whispered. I choose you. In Rada duinen si ground out morn any fastry. Ethan slipped the simple ring onto her finger. There were no cameras, no signatures, no witnesses, only the sound of two hearts finally finding their rhythm in the quiet. Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle and rhythmic, the same way it had the night Ethan signed the first contract. But this time, it was not a symbol of surrender. It was renewal. He drew her into his arms, resting his forehead against hers. You turned my life upside down, he murmured. Ava smiled through the shimmer of tears. Good. Now it finally looks right side up. And for the first time since their marriage began, Ethan Voss knew exactly what forever felt like. 6 months later, the world had moved on from the scandal. Business headlines no longer called Ethan Voss the reckless CEO, but the man who redefined corporate leadership. The Voss-Leighton merger had quietly dissolved, yet both companies were thriving in their own right. Investors who once doubted Ethan now praised him for rebuilding trust through transparency. But for Ethan and Ava, the true victory was not in profit or reputation. It was in peace. They had moved out of the penthouse and into a restored brownstone on the Upper West Side, a place with creaking floors, ivy-covered windows, and a backyard garden that Ava had filled with white roses. The mornings were slower there. No board meetings, no flashing cameras, no whispered deals. Just coffee, laughter, and the soft rhythm of normal life. One Sunday morning, Ethan stood by the kitchen counter pouring 2 cups of coffee. The sun streamed through the curtains, catching the faint scar on his hand from the night he had torn up their contract. Ava walked in barefoot, hair still damp from her shower, wearing one of his shirts like it belonged to her. She smiled. You still make it too strong. He handed her a mug. You still complain every time. They sat by the window, looking out at the small patch of garden below. The roses swayed in the breeze, heavy with new blooms. Ava sipped her coffee, her voice quiet. Do you ever miss it? The noise, the power, the constant chase? Ethan shook his head. Power without purpose is just noise. I used to think success was about control. Now I know it is about peace. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You sound like a man finally free. He smiled. That is because I am. You taught me that freedom is not walking away from something. It is choosing what truly matters. Ava looked at him, eyes warm. And what matters to you now, Ethan Voss? He turned toward her, his answer simple. You. Later that afternoon, they visited the new community center Ava had designed in her mother's name. Children played in the courtyard, volunteers handed out meals, and on the entrance wall a small bronze plaque read, The Margaret Leighton Foundation, built on integrity and kindness. Ava ran her hand across the plaque, smiling. She would have loved this, she said. She would have loved you more, Ethan replied. You finished what she started. As the sun set behind the city skyline, the two of them stood side by side, watching the lights spill across the playground. It was a simple moment, but it felt like everything they had been fighting for: truth, dignity, and love that asked for nothing in return. A few children ran up to them, offering small white roses from the garden. Ava knelt to accept them, her laughter carrying through the air. Ethan watched her, realizing he had never seen her so alive. When she stood, she handed him one of the flowers. You know, she said, this is the first thing we built together that was not part of a contract. Ethan took the rose gently. No paperwork, no signatures, just trust. She smiled. Just choice. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. The best deal I ever made. The camera would have faded out there if this were still a performance. But this was not a performance anymore. It was real. As the evening lights flickered on across the city, Ethan and Ava walked hand in hand through the garden they had planted together, surrounded by laughter, honesty, and the quiet kind of love that needed no audience. For once, there were no contracts to sign, no terms to honor, no conditions to meet, only two people who had finally learned that the truest promise is the one made without ink. And somewhere in the distance, as the wind brushed through the roses, The world seemed to whisper back their story, the story of a man who thought he was trapped in an arranged marriage until the bride lifted her veil and gave him back his heart.